Hello, my name is Michael Lambert. Today I want to start by reading you a comment on my last week's video. It was sent in from a guy called Nick Ross, who is, I think he must be a subscriber because he seems to comment quite often on my videos. And, this is what Nick said. He said, please stop your meaningless tirades about leaving the corrupt and stinking EU. It's obvious by your massive bias. You have not a clue about what is really taking place. So go educate yourself first, then perhaps you might be qualified to comment. In the meantime, what you say is meaningless. And anyway, you'll be dead soon. So bearing that in mind, I better get on quickly because I'd hate to expire during the course of this video. I wanted this week to comment a little bit on various things that have been going on in politics during the last 7 days. And one thing that did strike me was how, if you think back to 3 years ago, we had Trump in the White House and we had Johnson in number 10, and they were both riding high. And seeing the two of them this week, it's interesting to see how they've both really they're both finished, I think. Seeing Trump doing so much worse in the midterms than he expected, or his candidates doing so much worse than expected, I think it tells us that many of the rednecks who supported him are now beginning to perhaps wonder whether or not storming the Capitol was a good idea, or whether or not he is going to make America great again, or whether or not he did actually win the election. And I think he's washed up. And likewise, seeing Johnson arriving at Sharm el-Sheikh for the COP27, where I think he thought he was going to upstage Sunak by being there without Sunak being there. Again, he just looked like yesterday's man. He turned up looking all dishevelled as usual. He gave a speech. It was a pretty rambling speech. It wasn't quite as bad as the Peppa Pig speech, but it wasn't very impressive. And he didn't get the attention that he's been used to, because, of course, Sunak was there at the same time, and he was the only one. I mean, all that matters was what he had to say. It didn't matter really at all what Johnson was saying. So again, I think he's gone. I think it's quite a good thing for all of us that they're both out of the way. But to comment on just some of the other characters who've appeared in the news this week, Gavin Williamson is quite an interesting one. You have to wonder. It's stuff is coming out about him all the time, and people say about how he liked, when he was chief whip, to have dirt on people. He liked to have information that he could use to discipline people and so on. And how, as the case, we've probably all heard the interview about the fact that he once gave a cheque to a backbench MP and then with the message that now I own you. And you have to wonder why a government minister who'd been sacked twice was knighted. And you also have to wonder why did Sunak appoint him as a minister with that portfolio? Why did he put him in the cabinet, knowing that he'd twice been sacked before and that there was an investigation going on? And you have to wonder, did he maybe have some information on Sunak, something embarrassing? Who knows? But it seemed very odd to me that he would ever be appointed, and I suspect he's not going to be appointed a fourth time, whoever is Prime Minister. And then there's Lord Wolfson, isn't there? Now, Lord Wolfson was very, very keen on Brexit. It was going to make us all so much more successful and so on, and his shops were all going to do so well. He's the chief executive of Next. And now he's whining that he can't get enough staff because we've sent them all home. He says it's not the sort of Brexit he voted for, not what he wanted. Well, when we went to the polls to vote for or against Brexit, there were only two options. But he doesn't like the way it's worked out. And this is an excuse we hear this a lot of the time. It's there's nothing wrong with Brexit at all. It's just the way it was done, or it's only been partly done, and all this stuff. And here's somebody, a person in his position whining now he can't get enough staff when the reason he can't get enough staff is because of the choices that he made, and of course millions of others. Then we've got the former Secretary of State for Health, haven't we, out in Australia, making a fool of himself, eating maggots and things. He's doing it apparently in order to raise awareness for, I think it's dyslexia, isn't it? And you have to question yourself. You have to say, well, I wonder if he would have gone all the way to Australia to eat maggots in an unreality show to support dyslexia if they'd only paid him 20,000 instead of the 400,000 he's getting. And of course, he's still an MP, and he's taking time off when he should be looking after his constituents. I mean, it's just so shabby and so really so demeaning. And then the other one I'd just like to mention is Kwasi Kwarteng. And now this is a man I've never been very fond of. I think he's thoroughly arrogant. He has that arrogance that people like Rees-Mogg and one or two others have. Some of this sort of idea that he's cleverer than everybody else and so on. And clearly he was absolutely in thick with Liz Truss. They would have discussed the budget, the financial statement together. They'd have worked on it together. They would have agreed it. He sort of talked about it before it was actually made, saying about how they were going to cut taxes and so on. After he delivered the statement, he went around the studio saying there was even more to come. And then, of course, as we all know, it was an absolute, utter disaster. And so he's had a couple of weeks at home thinking, well, I was expecting, having been Chancellor, I was expecting to get some huge job in the city when I retire, resign as an MP, and I was going to go get one of those jobs where you get £250,000 a year for popping in 3 days a week or something. And he must have thought, well, my chances are not that good now because of this budget, so I must distance myself from the budget. So what he's decided to do now is to say, nothing to do with me, Gov. It was all Liz Truss. And I just personally, I find this just so disgusting. I just to blame somebody else for something which you're equally culpable for. I mean, it's just outrageous. And I just think it's a mark of the man. No integrity, no decency, no backbone. To actually blame somebody else, say, well, I didn't really want to do it, but she wanted to. Now, I watched Prime Minister's Questions this week, and I have to say that Sunak, watching him, I mean, he was very poor this week. I mean, the first 2 weeks he sort of got away with it. He's used these cheap cracks about Starmer being in league with or being a supporter of Corbyn and so on, which fell flat anyway. But this week he was absolutely hopeless. And looking at him and looking at that front bench, you can see they've got no idea. But the thing that came across to me about Sunak watching him in PMQs was he just is not up to it. Quite apart from the fact that the job of doing anything very positive with our economy right now because of Brexit and all the other problems is almost impossible. But apart from that, he just is not up to it. I think he was probably a perfectly competent Chancellor of the Exchequer, but I don't think he's the politician. I don't think he's got the breadth to be Prime Minister. And I thought Starmer was very clever, and I think the Labour Party being very clever and using this word weak. He used it several times during Prime Minister's Questions. I've since heard other shadow ministers describe Sunak as weak. And you could see, whilst Starmer was saying, how weak Sunak is, you could see it was getting through, because Sunak knows he's weak. He's entirely beholden to the geriatric right-wingers in the ERG sitting behind him. And he's presiding over a desperate economy. He is very, very weak. And I think the more that Labour go on about that, I think the better. And when you look at the state of the company, the country, what he has to deal with, you look at the cost of living crisis. I know we've talked about this before, but everything seems to be falling apart. NHS is falling apart. Nothing is really working. So many strikes of nurses and the rail workers and the civil servants are talking about going on strike. And morale is so low. And at the same time, you see the average pay of the FTSE 100 chief executives went up last year by 23%. And at the same time, you've got the Bank of England saying people shouldn't ask for rises above 3% because we can't afford it. And all this is really, this sense of injustice is making people more and more annoyed. At the moment, I think, we've got distractions, haven't we? I mean, amongst all the people who watch these things, there's things like there's this jungle thing with Hancock on going on. That's distracting everybody. It's all over the papers, isn't it? The popular press are writing all about that. Then we've got the World Cup, which is going to keep us all busy, and then it'll be Christmas. But after Christmas, we're suddenly going to find, it's all going to become clear that we're in a real mess. And this government, as I say, looking at the front bench, looking so glum and so incompetent, so hopeless. Just look at them. Yeah, we've got, what's she called, that coffee woman, and Oliver Dowden's back in the cabinet. You just look at the faces. They've been the government at a time when Johnson was the government. I mean, everything that happened was what Johnson wanted, and they were all just still sort of tagged along behind him. But now they're all going to make decisions to take responsibility because Sunak's not domineering in the way that Johnson was. And you can see they haven't got a clue. They just simply do not know what they're doing. And it's very difficult to be at all optimistic because there just doesn't seem to be any way out. The economy is declining so fast. We're now, what is it, in recession, aren't we? We know that we're going to be we're forecast to be the 19th out of the G20, 19th, or the slowest growing of all except for Russia next year. And our credit rating is going down. And I mean, we need something, I think, we need someone a bit stronger than Sunak. And when there isn't anybody. And then, of course, there's all this stuff about immigration, because that's a big distraction. We've got immigration out of control because of the fact that we made it virtually impossible for people to come here, and so they're all coming here in little boats. And people keep saying, well, why do they have to come here? Why do they choose? I'll tell you why they come here. There are three reasons why all these people are so keen to come here. One is the English language. Two is they've probably got friends or relatives here. And third is because this is the only country where you can come and just work without paying any taxes. There are thousands and thousands of people who are working, who are not paying any PAYE, any NHI. I know somebody who has been, he came here as a student, and 5 years ago he graduated, and he asked for leave to appeal. And they said, yes, okay, come and sign on every 3 weeks, but you mustn't work, you mustn't earn any money. 5 years has gone by, he's gone back every 3 weeks. Still hasn't been a decision. He comes from the Far East. It's a very simple case. The decision will be quite simple. He doesn't think he will be granted permission to stay. And he says, if they tell me to go, I'll go. I'm ready to go. But in the meantime, he's been working for 5 years. How do you survive if you're not allowed to work? As I said last week, all these people cooped up in these so-called five-star hotels, why can't they go out and work? It's all, as I say, it's all such a mess, and there doesn't seem to be any serious form of planning. We know we've got the budget coming up on Thursday, where we know that there are going to be tax increases. We know there are going to be spending cuts, and we know that bank interest rates have gone up, and frankly, the reason is said to try and curb inflation. But frankly, the idea of actually putting up interest rates and taking money out of the economy when people are so short of money doesn't make much sense to me, but then I'm not an economist. But anyway, that's really what I think about things as they are at the moment. And so let me finish by reading you a load of these comments from my last week's video. There are quite a lot of them, so I mean, if you get bored, just switch off. I think I got around 2,000 comments to last week's video, and the vast majority, as always, were supportive and positive, and I'm always very, very grateful for anybody who comments at all. And I read every one of them, and I would love to reply to all of them, but I just don't have the time, so I don't reply to comments. But even so, here are some of the ones that you may find amusing or interesting. Stephen Waitman said, "Congratulations, you managed to be wrong on all, just like that idiot Carney. We are doing better than the EU, and we can hold our heads up high. The EU is sinking fast." See, he's one of these that takes this stuff that he's told we're doing fine, and everywhere else is doing worse. It's worse everywhere else. Worse than Zimbabwe, Venezuela. Whew. Phil Holding. If you want to be under the boot of the so-called EU, so-called, I don't know why it's so-called, it's called that, then fill your boots. Perhaps you prefer to be submissive to them, and the UK to have no autonomy stroke independence. I am built of stronger stuff than that. Kay Wilton says, Brexit was chosen by the majority of voters because the voters wanted their country's laws made only in the UK and not by the EU. All EU laws not wanted, only UK laws accepted, and many of them are also not wanted. I think Kay Walton must be a lawyer of some sort. Roland Hawkins says, I thought this was about Brexit. Last week I did a thing about, I talked about imagining we were a bus as opposed to being to represent the economy, and how it was, getting on having trouble because we were going on this narrow road off the motorway and so on. And a person called Roland Hawkins watched that, and he said, I thought this video was about Brexit, but he's going on about bus driving. This bloke is utterly insane. In his tiny little patronising mind, he thinks he knows what he's talking about. Lol. Of course the old fart rides on buses for free. Absolutely right, I do. I have a bus pass and very, very grateful for it. A guy called The Legend of Spitfire says, idiots like this are killing our country. People will use food banks if it's free and save their money for cigarettes, beer and drugs. There's a nice, compassionate man there. He thinks they all queue up to feed their children and go home with their bags of food and then immediately get out the champagne and the cigars and use their very expensive phones to order drugs, I expect. Martin Mack says, you see, this is the problem with social media. It gives an undeserving platform to twats like this. John Allen. Yet another Romaniac refusing to accept the result. Had we been given the full Brexit for which we voted, instead of the half-baked, oven-ready deal Boris foisted on us, we would not have had the problems we have now. Still, look at your age. I doubt you'll be around much longer. It's another one, you see. It's a bit, do I look that old? I don't know. Windy Pup says, Britain is overpopulated and does not need more people. And we have our own vitality, which conquered 2/3 of the world. Our vitality conquered 2/3 of the world. Such a pity we gave it back. Why don't we keep India and Canada and Australia and New Zealand? We should have kept them all, I don't know. These unwanted immigrants put huge pressures on our infrastructure, which we have to pay for. They should stay in their own countries and build them up to our standard, not run over here and drag us down. They're all dragging us down. Incidentally, in terms of immigrants dragging us down, 19 of the 30 people in the cabinet are children of immigrants, and I suppose you could say they are dragging us down quite effectively. Someone called John Allen says, all the EU's actions since the 23rd of June 2016 have been designed to punish us for having the temerity, for daring to leave their corrupt, undemocratic club. You see, it's all the Daily Express, it's all the Sun. They just read this stuff and they just parrot it out. It's Stig 58. It's not Brexit that's the problem. It's the god-awful politicians we have and misguided, gullible fools on this channel. That's the problem. That's you and me on this channel. Nothing more than the idea of an independent Britain, not to be part of a WEF, World Economic Forum, cartel in Brussels, control of our borders, finance, trade, fisheries, laws. Probably can think of a few more, but can't be bothered because commenting on this channel is a waste of time. So he thinks we've got control of our borders, our trade, our fisheries. Ask some of the fishermen. Mick Clark. One benefit, there's a benefit of Brexit, one benefit is to see a lot less foreigners taking over our country, our villages and towns, to the point where we do not recognise what was once our homes, not to feel invaded. See, this word that Braverman came out with a few weeks ago, this invasion, it's caught on. The people are quoting it here. They're talking about being invaded. He's being invaded, invading our villages. We have not enough homes for our kids, not good enough services for our families, not enough doctors, nurses. Everyone you see is a foreigner. Well, maybe one of the reasons we don't have any good services and we don't have enough doctors and nurses is because we sent them all home, because they're foreigners. He says in the end, it is about, all in capital letters, our homes, our land, our people. We don't want any foreigners coming here. Rodney Binks says, many immigrants only want to go to England because they receive free school, hospital, spelled Hospitle, Tremont, I think he means treatment, and handouts from the English government. He didn't mention about Wales or Scotland or Northern Ireland. Many of the immigrants have no intention, spelt wrongly, of learning English or working and fitting in with the English way of life. That's the problem, is it? Susan Pritchard says, you're, spelt wrongly, you're talking utter rubbish. The pandemic ruined the country. 400 billion spent on people's wages, staying at home. That's the black hole in the finances. Brexit still hasn't happened and probably never will. This is another line. Brexit hasn't happened, or it's only partly happened, or it hasn't happened in the way it should happen. How do you say it hasn't happened? Graham Moore, it's not very clear. Why? Because you have not committed to the cause. The cult. Because folks don't see or want to commit fully to sovereignty. You're just rambling on and making matters worse with your dithering. Frankly, get on the bus and leave the driver to take you where we asked the bus to go. I think we asked the bus to go to the sunlit uplands, so we could watch the unicorns prancing around. I've never heard so a pathetic price of a bunkum. That's not an analogy. He's talking about my thing last week. That's not an analogy. It's an anaesthetic for insomnia. Get a grip. If you can't add to the solution, then you're part of the problem. Bleeding heart liberals. Chris Morgan. You voted. You lost. So get over it. Shortage of workers from the 10 million plus doctors, scientists and engineers that have invaded these shores recently. Now this is somebody who's got their little computer and they've typed out the shortage of workers from the 10 million plus doctors, scientists and engineers. 10 million. And you can't get a doctor, and there are 10 million of them here. They all come across the channel, invaded us. Ian Sadler says, what a condescending prat this man is. Not really condescending, Ian. If I was to say to you, you'd probably better spend your time looking at videos of cats falling off chairs or something that you can understand. That would be condescending, but what I said I don't think was condescending. Lindsay Madden says, this guy's not got a clue. Brexit is not to blame, in capitals. It's the corrupt, lying, backstabbing, greedy, in capitals, politicians who have been totally incompetent. The EU has become a total dictatorship with overpaid, unelected bureaucrats who are hell-bent on control. Nothing ever seems to get sorted out. And if you don't comply with their demands, just look at how they are treating Poland and Hungary. I hope they're not being mean to that nice Mr. Orban. She says nothing ever gets sorted out. I wonder what she wanted sorting out that they didn't ever sort out. Somebody called Trev's Travels. It has nothing to do with Brexit, but everything to do with an inept, I think he means inept government and the puppet masters that are controlling them. And then there's a guy called Robert Young. He commented. His comment is in the comment section. His comment is, "You're not worth a comment." A little bit later on, he goes on. He says he comes back for another comment. He says, "Oh dear, the sour grapes is back." Starman, he says, "So covered, and a breakout of war has got nothing to with it." I don't know whether he's English or not, but I think the covered, where he spelled COVID, I think that's meant to be COVID. So COVID and a breakout, I think he means an outbreak of war, has got nothing to do with it. Interest rates and the prices of food and commodities have gone up in the United States as well, also in Europe. So shut up, FFS. No idea what FFS means, but lots of people use it. And just a few more, if you're still there. Tom Benson, he says, "My goodness, do I get a medal for listening to this rubbish to the end?" No, Tom, you might get a medal for being stupid enough to watch something to the end that you are not interested in. And Michael Hopp says, "Oh dear, you're such a negative, boring person. Go get a life before you bore yourself to an early grave." A lot of death in these things here. Wessex Man says, "Michael, you have seen what the EU people are like." I have. They're awful. They're awful. If ever you go to Europe, I mean, there's 450 million. They are just awful. I mean, that's why we got rid of them. Thank God. I mean, awful people. I've seen what they're like. They're anti-democratic. They're ruthless. They're vindictive, and they're money grabbers. I know. The moment you get off the boat in Calais, they're at you. They're anti-democratic, ruthless, vindictive money grabbers. Why, oh why, would you ever want to be involved with them again? We will survive. A.K.A. the boy says, "This guy's full of shite. Get over it." And the very last one is from a gentleman called Colin Wishbone. He again, I think he's a subscriber. He comments most weeks, and he says, "Well, with people like you stirring it, what do you expect?" And then the rest is all in capitals. "As an 85-year-old, people like you make me angry that millions of people died to prevent dictatorships. But you lefties are a disgrace with your anti-democratic stirrings." You see, that's what I really want. I want to go back to a dictatorship. I'm not sure who the dictator is in the EU. Is it Ursula von der Leyen or somebody else? But anyway, so I mean, if you've stayed, I hope you found those of enlightening. You've learned something from those comments. But it does show, I think, how there are still an awful lot of people. These are the people who Keir Starmer's whose vote he wants to keep by saying that we'll never go back into the EU. These sort of people who are really are beyond hope, I think. The people who are never going to be persuaded that Brexit was the best thing that ever happened. So anyway, if you have watched this far, thank you very much indeed. And until next week, assuming I'm still alive, bye for now.